So my name's Ross, and I am the founder and business associate of Chase Classic Motors right here in Clinton Township, just a stone's throw away from where we are at the beautiful Columbia Center here in Troy. And one of the things that we do that's unique as a classic car workshop is that we service and work on vintage emergency vehicles. We're into all classics. We're into mainstream classics, forgotten classics, and as I like to say, some of the things that people don't even know are classics, like this 1984 Plymouth Gran Fury Pursuit package right behind me, one of the very last remaining, possibly the only remaining M-body Plymouth that was used by the Michigan State Police. Between 1984, and usually they'd have these cars in service till 2 or 3 years, until they accumulated about 50 to 60,000 miles. And then of course, they're sold at auction. They're tools designed in the mid-1980s to be used by the government and then thrown away and they get something else. So one of the reasons, of course, with our Michigan weather, it eats cars like this for dinner, but then you have to also understand that these cars were made on a budget to be sold to the government as cheaply as possible and then thrown away like any other tool of the trade and replaced with something else. The response that we get, not only from people like yourselves, but also from the public at large, is just outstanding. And we're so glad that we get to share this positive moment and this experience with everyone to be able to present a pure piece of Michigan history. Because as far as we know, this is the only living example of this car still around, at least one used by the Michigan State Police.
So I'm going to put a link to your site and to your videos right above your head.
Okay.
I'm curious, has anybody ever stopped by and said, man, I remember getting pulled over by one of these? Or?
That actually happens more often than you would think. Well, we just had a retired police officer here remembering starting out with a car like this in the 1980s when he was a young buck cadet. But other than that, even people that have had bad experiences with cars like this in the time, now that the car is over 40 years old, is no longer a threat to anyone, like they can actually reminisce and go, wow, I can't believe I was actually that stupid back then, or boy, did that ever teach me a lesson. Now, to the point where now I'm a middle age or I'm old age, and we've had parents, we've had grandparents say, hey kiddo, did I ever tell you the story of how stupid daddy or grandpa was, when he was young? Don't ever be like that, because then you have to ride in a car like this. One of the things we really appreciate is when retired troopers will see a car like this, they'll remember it from their own personal life, from their own history, their professional history as a police officer here, and seeing the emotions that they go through and hearing the war stories that they'll tell us is really moving. I remember once we actually took this car to Frankenmuth, to the Auto Fest, and there was a retired trooper, just came up with his wife, and he said, 1984, that's the year I started. This was the first car I ever drove. At least his twin sister would have been. And I said, well, unfortunately, Eric, who restored this car with his own blood, sweat, and tears, it took him over a year to restore it. But I said, hey, why don't you jump in, see if it brings back any memories? He did. And I think the memories overtook him a little too quickly, because by the time he got out of the car, he was acting like a different man. His wife actually had to come over and hug him as he walked away, and all he could muster was a thank you as he walked away, almost in tears. And it just reminds me that maybe some of those experiences he had were bad, they were tragic. And it took him right back to 40 years ago when it happened. But I also like to think that maybe it was such a time machine moment that all of a sudden he was just whisked back to a day when he was a younger man and got to relive so much of that in his life that it actually felt good. And that's why emotion overtook him.
And for those not from Michigan, I know there's a term for the light, the light on top and then the sign on the hood. Those are unique kind of.
So that is unique to Michigan. We really appreciate the longevity and history that the Michigan State Police cars have always maintained in that continuity going all the way back to the 1960s. They still looked like this, even 60 years ago. But on top, Unity Manufacturing of Chicago ran the RV26, which is a twin bulb beacon equipped with either par 36 or par 46 twin bulbs. And inside, there's just a simple rotary mechanism attached to an electric motor that not only lights the bulbs, but also spins them around at the same time. And that was used by the Michigan State Police until the late 2010s. So that exact design. Recently, however, the governor of Michigan decided that because it's a Michigan state vehicle, the equipment should be manufactured here in Michigan. So another company that's Michigan-based now has the contract to design and manufacture the beacons, the roof-mounted beacons that are on the Michigan State Police cars. But one of the most interesting, as you pointed out, fascinating pieces of history is the hood sign, or what the Michigan Vehicle Code refers to as a hailer. Michigan State Police troopers actually call it a shark fin. But this sign goes all the way back to the days when the Michigan State Police, first they patrolled on horses around the time of the First World War, when the Michigan State Police was first commissioned in 1917 by act of state legislature. And then eventually they patrolled on motorcycles. And these hailer signs were actually equipped on the motorcycles that eventually transitioned over to automobiles. And back in the days before the rotating emergency lights, they would actually pull alongside a motorist at night. That sign illuminates at night. You can flip a switch and it lights up. Today, however, it's really not used for anything else other than when you're in a dense residential or commercial neighborhood. You flip the sign on kind of like a Lyft or an Uber, just so people know when you pull into their driveway at the middle of the night, it's the police and not some random motorist.
Thank you for bringing both cars out today, and yeah, go visit, what's your website again?
ChaseClassicMotors.com.
All right.
We serve and protect great cars, like this one.
Thank you. Thanks for the overview, and I drawn to this like a magnet. So.
You're welcome, Mike. Great
Thanks.
to meet you, and I really hope your audience enjoys what we brought out today.
Yep.